Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Three Principles Global Community webinar. The Three Principles Global Community, or 3PGC, is a nonprofit organization that's committed to bringing an understanding of the three principles to people throughout the world. You can learn more about the Three Principles Global Community at 3pgc.org, and the link is also below the video on YouTube and on Google+. Also, we're doing this webinar on Google+. So if you are watching us on Google+, there's a Q&A box on the right-hand side. You can type in questions. And if you're on YouTube, you can go ahead and type in a comment. I'm monitoring that box as well. So I also, before I introduce Gabriela, who is with us today, I also want to remind everybody that the 2016 3PGC conference that's being held in the Los Angeles area this year in October is having an early bird discount, and that ends this week, actually tomorrow, July 15th. So if you are thinking of coming, please go to the Three Principles Conference website, and the link is below the video as well, and register there. Take advantage of the discount. So today I am very happy to introduce Gabriela Maldonado, and Gabriela over the past 20 years has worked with people sharing the three fundamental principles that help human beings experience life with a sense of gentleness and hope. She has an abiding commitment to help people thrive and enjoy life. Gabriela has worked with many people in a wide variety of circumstances, including children and youth in extreme situations, adults in leadership positions, international coaches, business owners, and people who wish to release their natural genius. Gabriela loves living in the Silicon Valley, one of the centers of innovation, where she enjoys how the creativity of the human mind is constantly bringing new ideas to life. One of her great strengths is working seamlessly with ethnically and cultural diverse groups. Currently, she offers personal coaching, retreats, training, and webinars in both English and Spanish. So, Gabriela, I'm so pleased that you're joining us today, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Bonnie. Well, good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. And I'm very thankful to be here. Thank you for putting this together. Thank you to the Three Principles Global Community, because I know they're doing a great job at sharing the principles globally. And today I wanted to talk about the idea of the fact that we are the principles in action versus we are going to be teaching the principles to somebody, because this for me was a huge revelation. And you know, it was funny because this morning as I was getting prepared to be with you, what kept on coming to my mind was that song, I think it was in the 80s, We Are the World, you know, we are the world, we are the children, and we are the principles. So I want to talk a little bit about what that insight meant to me. So I came across the principles in 1996 through a training that Dr. Roger Mills was doing, and I remember the first insight that I had, which was that no matter what a human being was going through, there was a sense of, not a sense, but there was a core of well-being and wisdom, regardless of what was happening, and that nothing could really touch this, not experience, not a past, not a diagnosis. And that was my first big insight. That was like a big bong, you know, in my head. It just resonated to the very center of my soul, really. And I just started sharing this with people. I was working at a nonprofit. I was working with kids, and I was just sharing. And then at one point, I became a little crusader of the principles, right? I had this job at the county. That was what I got paid for. Personally, it helped me so much. And And so I would take every opportunity that I had to start sharing. I mean, every opportunity, whether it was at work, in a meeting, at a party, at a coffee shop, it was just like, I was so excited, but I also today I just noticed I was like a little soldier of the principles, you know, just kind of bombarding people with my excitement and sometimes my agenda. And so today I can see how there were many times that I was really disrespectful of people's time. You know, I just wanted to share this, and I came into the room at that period in my life with this idea of, I know something you don't. And if you did, and if you saw this, you would be better. You know, it was very subtle, I have to say. It wasn't in the forefront of my eyes, really. And there were many times when I walked into the room, particularly with colleagues, you know, colleagues that I was working with in the county that were not sharing the principles. And I came in with this idea that I know better than you do, and I know the truth and you don't. Again, unbeknownst to me. What I would feel was this little intensity inside of me to want to share. And I also had a sense of dismissal. Like today I realized that as people were trying to talk to me, I was a little dismissive. And so at this point in the talk, I would like to invite you to see the psychological innocence in me, because I just really at that moment thought that that was what I was supposed to be doing, right? I just really didn't realize what I was doing. And I think that's the truth of human beings, right? We're doing the best we can given what we're thinking. But what I was thinking at the time is that I had something that they didn't have, and that I was better because I knew something. I knew the truths, right? And they just knew techniques. Okay, so anyway, so, you know, time goes on, and, you know, sometimes that's in the forefront of my eyes. Sometimes, I mean, what I mean is, like, sometimes I'm in that kind of thinking, and sometimes I'm not, right? Because that's what happens also. It's not like I'm doing that all the time. But then one day I was working at the county jail, actually the juvenile hall for kids. And working with kids is something that I've always loved. I just enjoy being with kids. I enjoy being with teenagers that are having difficult times. And, you know, I love their genuineness and their rawness. You know, they're not domesticated yet. They're not super educated yet. So it's very easy to see where they are. And I was going into the unit that I was working in with these kids that had experienced lots and lots of situations, and that were incarcerated because they were accused of the most aggressive of actions, really. So I was going into this unit, and of course, because of the kind of crimes that these kids had committed, there were a lot of programs there, right? I mean, everybody was there, and everybody's trying to work with these kids because everybody is trying to save these kids, right? Because these are the worst kids ever. So I remember walking in there and just seeing like 3 or 4 different professionals that were pulling kids out for groups, you know. And it dawned on me how many people were trying to help these kids. And then it dawned on me that the attitude that a lot of these adults had, including me at some points, was, I need to save you, you know. if you only knew this, you would, whatever, stop gangbanging, start using drugs, stop hurting people, right? And it dawned on me how all of us were just talking at these kids. We were just kind of, throwing all this information on them. And at that moment, I just realized that nobody was just hanging out with them, just being with them from one human being to another. We are all trying to save them, to teach them, to help them, to, let them see the light, all this stuff. So that was a huge insight for me. The idea that I can actually just be with these kids because, look, there's like an army of people helping them. So I started hanging out with these kids. I just started coming into the room without an agenda, right? Just like, well, let me just hang out with them. Let me just love them. Let me just play with them a little, because of course not a lot of people play with these kids, right? Everybody's just teaching. So I started playing Pictionary, and I started, bringing games and charades and all this stuff. And in the process, what happened is that I started seeing more and more and more the wisdom in these kids, their capacity to reflect, their capacity to notice, their desire to not suffer, to do well in life. And I started seeing that these kids were the principles in action, like literally in front of me, right? That it was not that I had to connect them to mine or, to help them calm down so they could actually have an insight. I realized that I was literally in the presence of the principles in action in these kids. There were the many different forms that the principles can take shape. And it just tickled me. It just tickled me that here they were, the principles in action, in the shape of all these different kids, and that I had been trying to teach them what they were. And I knew that. I knew that at a certain level, but during this time, it was a process of seeing it and seeing it and seeing it and seeing it, and then boom, like, okay. And that was transformative for me. It really helped me relax. And because I started seeing more and more how they were the principles in action, I was able to share in real time, using their lives. And I have to say, it was very joyful. It is very joyful when we are with people from that perspective. And then, of course, there is the realization that I am the principles in action too, right? And that was fantastic. That was fantastic for me because all of a sudden I felt super supported, super taken care of, super relaxed and joyful. Actually, I remember, joy coming into me, almost like laughing, thinking, wow, when I see this, there is not one worry that comes in my mind really, because mind is the ingredient that I am. I am mind in action, and I am thought in action, and I am consciousness in action. So it lightened up my experience of myself in the world and my experience of a teacher in the world and my experience of a helper in the world. It just, just kind of relaxed me. And what I realize now is that for a while, I was transitioning from the outside-in paradigm, right, from a technique paradigm, to the inside out, right? There was like the outside in and the inside out, and I was learning about the principles, but somehow I lapsed back to being in the paradigm of the outside in, right? And I thought my teaching was very important. I thought, yes, my teaching can give people insights. I just got confused. I just didn't even realize that I had gotten confused, right? I didn't realize that because I had learned, really all my education in college was, of course, based, on technique and all this stuff, right, outside in. I didn't realize that I had taken that world, right, and brought it back into the world of the principles and said, okay, what I teach people and what I share with people is what produces insight and changes. It just, like today, it's so obvious to me, but back then it just was not that obvious to me. Actually, I was completely blind to it. And then there was this process at that time of changing the words, and using mind, thought, and consciousness versus health realization and all this stuff. And we were having a discussion about the word consciousness because I was teaching classes in Spanish. And the word consciousness and the word conscience and the word awareness in Spanish is one word, right? Which is tricky, right? Yes, because you only have one word. And so I was having a discussion with this one person, this dear friend of mine, and she was telling me just how important she thought the words were, mind, thought, and consciousness. And I just said, it's just challenging because in Spanish, there's only one word for consciousness and conscience. So I just don't know that's in the words. I just don't think that really is it. And so I started having a variety of insights that released me more and more and more from the form. And it really allowed me to see the formless and the fact that that if it were the words, then Sid would have never had the insight that he had, right? Because the insight that Sid had did not come from the words that the psychologist shared with him. The insight that he had came from inside of him, because he also was the principles in action. Wow, so it relaxed me more to know that whenever a client of mine has an insight, whenever I'm working with somebody and they see something powerful for their lives, that ultimately it comes from them. And in talking to the kids, I realized that they also had noticed certain side effects of the principles without ever hearing about them. Now, I share the principles with people because I think it's very helpful. right? It's very helpful when you get clear about how you function as a human being, when you understand the roles of feelings and emotions, when you understand thought as a principle and that it passes, when you understand that we are resilient human beings. There are some things that if you understand, they are tremendously helpful. That's what I've shared in my career. That's what I'm going to continue to share. But what I am saying is that there is a difference between thinking that we are giving something to people and realizing that all people are the principles in action, even when they have the funniest of behaviors, right? The most compelling of behaviors. There is a different sense, there's a different feeling, there's a different perspective, there's a different way of working with people, depending upon what's in our mind. So all these reflections and all these insights actually help me to work with people more effectively, because I come into the world and I come into to the room often, not always, but often, with such a sense of connection to this other person, realizing that in a sense they're the same thing that I am, just in a different shape, with a different name, with a different hair color, right? With a different set of cultural beliefs, with a different set of memories. But when I come into the world seeing, and again, it's not always, right? But seeing that the principles are them and the principles is what I am, the immediate feeling that I get from that when I see that is just such a sense of alliance and honor and connection, which is quite different from thinking that I have something that you don't have and I know the truth and you don't. I mean, you can just feel the separation of that and the alignment of the other point of view. I also know that sometimes I lose that, right? Like, obviously, I don't see that all the time. And what happens is there's this lightness to when I get lost, right? Like, I often experience my own innocence, right? My own psychological innocence. I often experience other people's psychological innocence. Just really realizing that we're all doing the best we can given what we're thinking. So it just, the effects of having that insight, the effects of realizing that we are the principles in action, in my case, have been a sense of lightness, a sense of joy, a sense of connection, a sense of alignment, a sense of wonder, and a sense of appreciation. And when I see deeper this fact that I am the principles in action, like every other human being, I just get such a sense of relief, right? Because I see that the power of the universe is supporting me. You know, it's me in action. And when I get a little, like a little sense of that, the glass roof just disappears, just dissipates, right? Because then what's possible, right? So I want to open up. I don't know if there's anybody with us. Is there anybody with us?
There is. And,
Who's out there? Hello.
and
Go ahead, Bonnie.
there is someone who came on and said, where can I see the principles? It seems like they just found us and don't know what the principles are. I'm not sure if you want to address that in this conversation, but I thought I'd
okay. Sure. Yes.
okay.
Yes. Well, thank you. So we work. Well, look. So the principle, or they point to three laws of how every human being functions, or three laws of life. And these are just explaining how every person, so we're going to talk about them psychologically or spiritually or mentally, right? Because there are many applications, but if we're going to stick to that, these laws explain how every person creates their own personal experience of life, how each person creates their own feeling state, how each person has insight, how each person can experience change, right? They are not a recipe to have a particular quality of life, but they explain the recipe and why we experience what we experience. So I kind of wanted to be a little clear on that, because I think for many of us, we come into this this understanding, again, with the old paradigm of this is a technique, and it is not. It's just an explanation of how things work. And so we talk about three principles. And the first principle is the principle of mind. And the principle of mind really is the intelligence and energy of life. The second principle is the principle of thought, and it is this gift of creation, right? Again, psychologically is the gift or the law that we use to create our thinking, our thoughts, our experience of life. And the principle of consciousness is, again, another gift that allows us to experience what we have created through thought. You know, it's the sense of awareness. And together, through these principles, we create our personal experience of what's happening for us in our life. So some of the ramifications of that, because I like to make this really practical, but some of the ramifications of that, the side effects of it, is that one of them, I'll give you three, but one of them is that really, because of the energy and intelligence of life, and because of the power of thinking that each human being has, we start realizing that any human being can have a brand new thought at any time. Anyone can have insight about a situation that changes their perspective of life profoundly, right? We are this bubble machine of ideas, of new possibilities, of new perspectives. A side effect of this principle, psychologically also, is that there is an innate resiliency to human beings that have nothing to do with their biology or their past. It's this natural capacity that we have to transcend situations, of course, because new thoughts can occur to us about a certain situation. Another side effect of these principles are the fact that each person creates their own experience of the situation. So you can have two people in the same room with exactly this, looking at the same movie, and these people can have completely different opinions about the same movie, right? So this is why we get into arguments, really, right? This is why we all have such different opinions, because we're all using this capacity of thought to create our particular perspective or view of the world. And another side effect of the principles is the fact that our feeling state and our emotions come from inside of us, depending upon what kind of thinking is happening inside of us at the moment. So, this is a big one, because so many of us think or grew up or were educated believing that our feeling state came from other people or other situations. And so as you start discovering how you function as a human being, you realize that your feeling state is a reflection of the quality of your thinking, right? Which can be liberating and also daunting, because it's liberating because you realize that life by itself, by circumstances, cannot really hurt you, right? Because hurt, which is a feeling, comes from a thought. And it's daunting because you realize that you cannot blame anybody anymore, right? Like, you just sort of have to, you don't have to, but you just sort of are left in the room with you, just you and your thinking, right? So that's kind of like, in short, I think for the person that's asking that question, there is a lot of literature and there are many people that share the principles in many different ways. But the most powerful thing about it is that it all of a sudden shows you that your experience is not coming from outside of you, that your experience of the world, your feelings, your emotion, the way that you look at anything that happens to you really is created inside of ourselves via these principles. And that these principles, understanding the principles is like understanding the operating system of a phone, right? It gives you a better sense of how things are working and why things are. So that's kind of like in a little nutshell for now. But I want to check with the rest of the participants and see if there are any questions or comments in regards to, the topic of seeing that we are the principles in action versus thinking that these are things that we need to put into effect or that we need to connect to. And I don't know, Bonnie, if there are some questions up there in the world.
I want to remind everyone there is a Q&A box on the right side. So please feel free to type in your questions if you're on Google+, or if you're on YouTube, you can type in a comment and I can read that to Gabriela as well. As I was listening to you, I so related to the story you were telling about almost being being over exuberant about sharing the principles and feeling that you had something that other people didn't. I had a wonderful experience the past couple of days. I frequently, when I'm around different family members, I feel a certain level of separation because, they're not interested in spirituality or, what I see as something that's really valuable. And I had a very similar insight to you, I don't know, recently, that that, as you did, that we really are the principals in action, and so are they, and I don't know anything more than they do. And when I went to this, to the past couple of days of spending some time with these family members, I had the most wonderful time. Because and they didn't change. It was everything in my mind and my thoughts changing, and we had such a beautiful connection, and I heard such wisdom. And it really struck me at how I, because of my thinking and my thoughts, that I couldn't see that they were principles in action as well, because I just wasn't giving them credit for even wanting to see it, or not, or feeling like I knew something that they didn't. So I really appreciated what you were saying about working with children, because it just made relaxing. It made such a difference with my experience with these family members. It was really lovely.
Yeah, again, just because we know about the principles, that doesn't mean that we don't, I don't know, that we skip certain things. And so because we start thinking that we know something that they don't, that's kind of what's in our mind, we really start experiencing that, right? That sense of separation, right? It's like, well, I'm interested in spirituality and you're not, right? Or I know this and you don't, or I understand the system better than you do. And so, of course, if that's what's happening in our minds, right, in our head, of course we're going to feel separated, and of course we're not going to perceive or catch their insight. And I have an example of this that was really, really powerful. When I was working at juvenile hall, I worked with a 14-year-old girl that had just been arrested, and her mom had told her that she was going to go visit her, and she had not yet. So she became part of the group, and I decided to have a one-on-one with her. And she told me, well, I'm just kind of sad my mom's not here. She told me that she was going to be here, and she hasn't shown up. And then she said, yeah, I'm really bummed. And I'm like, okay, and I'm just kind of quiet a little, right? Not jumping at the bit to tell her, well, sadness comes from your thinking, and, blah, 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 because it just did not feel appropriate at that time. Maybe at another time it would have felt appropriate, but at that time it didn't. And what she said shocked me, because what she said was the following. I mean, sort of not exact words, but the point is that she said, I know that I'm pretty sad right now, but I know I'm going to be okay. And I was a little shocked by that. She had not been in any of my classes. She had just come into the unit. And I said, really? How do you know you're going to be okay? And she said, well, right now I'm just sad, but this feeling is going to go away, and I'm going to experience a different feeling as soon as I start thinking of something different. Yes. I was like, excuse me? Right? Because she's 14, mind you, she's 14, right? And I said, really? You think that? She goes, yes. And I said, how do you know that? She goes, well, I have observed that happening. I said, really? She says, yes. I noticed that some of my girlfriends get very, very upset when they're having problems with their boyfriends, or they break up with their boyfriends, and they're crying and whatever. But then a little while later, as they get distracted, they start feeling better. So I know that that's going to happen to me. Now, I can take that opportunity and really create a dialogue with her, you see. We start creating a dialogue. But I was so happy for me that I was able to observe that there was a pause in me, right? That I didn't feel so pressure or excited about teaching. Because in that pause, there was a moment of openness where she now was sharing something about her understanding about life. And I'm so grateful that I didn't start bombarding her, right, with my knowledge of the principles, you know, and you're going to be okay, you're a resilient human being, blah, 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 which is all true. It's all true. It's all true. But as I was just a little bit more relaxed with her, being with her, understanding that this kid also is the principles in action, it gave room for her to share something and for her to hear herself and for me to learn. So I was so pleased with myself, actually. It's like, good job not talking, you know? Good job. Is there a question? It feels like there's a question.
There is a, yes, I think
Or
it is
comment.
a question. Yeah, it's from Farina, and she says, sometimes when I'm talking to people, I get a feeling that they don't really see what I see when I talk about the principles. They are often in a, I have to change my thinking frame, and I don't know how to respond since I do feel separated from them. Do you want me to repeat that?
No. So I'm just going to ask a couple of questions. I want to make sure that we understand because there feels like there's two things going on. Karina, right? So Karina, so you're saying you're sharing the principles and what they hear is change your thinking. And you realize that that's not what you're talking about. Is that true? You can type it.
And it's Verena, V-E.
Oh, Verena, sorry, Verena. Verena maybe has left us, or maybe she's just thinking about it.
Yeah. But I do think that you heard that right, because
Okay.
here she comes, she says, wow, that is really a wonderful and powerful story about the teenage girl. Thank you for sharing.
Mm.
Might have answered your question, I'm not sure. And we might have a little delay. So
Okay, sure.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, if that's part of the statement, I'll just start addressing it. It is fascinating to me how when you are in two different, like when you're having a dialogue and the person is in a different point of view than yours, we can continue to repeat what we have said loudly and stronger, you know, with bold letters and capitals. But if the person is still in her own perspective, the person's going to hear only what the person can hear at the moment, right? And just reflecting on my own learning, I mean, I had heard the principles so many times, and I had been teaching the principles, and I just didn't realize that the paradigm, the outside-in paradigm was so common and familiar to me. I didn't realize that I lapsed, you know, back and forth. I just didn't realize that. So I think it's common, you know, when we start talking about thinking, that people grab that word and they move back to what they know, right? Which is, what do I do to change my thinking? I think it's certainly, I mean, that certainly happens to me a lot. What that indicates to me, or what's helpful to me, is to listen a bit more. Not to try to convince them, right? But just to let me hear you. Let me see what it is that I'm missing. Because I think what we tend to do, or at least what I tend to do, is we see that and we goes, and we stop, of course, we stop listening right away and we go, yes, but, yes, but, yes, but, right? And the person can only hear it from an outside-in perspective of, let's change the thinking. Now, what's remarkable to me is that all human beings, or seems like a lot of human beings, are waking up to the idea that thinking has something to do with their quality of life, right? So when I hear the yes, but, yes, but, yes, but, what it indicates to me is that I need to listen deeper. I need to listen more. Maybe I just got too excited too quickly, right? What doesn't seem to help is this, well, let me say it to you again louder. So there's something about listening that is that it's powerful. Now, whether they see it the way you see it or not, the principles are still operating the same way, right? So when you feel that sense of separation, as I do sometimes, right, and Bonnie feels it sometimes, it's just a really nice indicator for us to, let's go back and observe again. Let me see if I can see the principles in action or not. And sometimes you will and sometimes you won't. It's just part of the nature of the game, right? But if we say that your feelings and emotions are an indicator of the quality of your thinking, and if that's true, when you are sharing the principles and all of a sudden you feel that separation or that frustration or that desire to share loudly, right, and in bold capitals, that's indicating to you also that there's something going on in your thinking. Something's happened to the quality of your thinking, and maybe now we have become a little over enthusiastic at the moment, in trying to share these, and we at the moment are not seeing that the person in front of you really is the principles in action the way that you are the principles in action, right? So that's another huge teaching for me. I talk to people a lot about your feelings and emotions are just an indicator to the quality of your thinking, right? They don't mean anything. They just indicate to you what's going on. Somehow, I forget that sometimes when I'm sharing, right? I feel frustrated because people don't get it, right? And I'm like, oh, here we go again. How am I going to say this to you, for crying out loud, right? I mean, like, that happens to me. And so I'm like, okay, let me just step back. As soon as I notice that I'm getting a little too intense or urgent, as soon as I notice, I realize, oh, this feeling is indicating something about the quality of my thinking about this. Okay. Right? So we can look at our understanding of the principles and use that understanding as we are working with people. Like, it doesn't change. Like, nothing about that change. We still can be working with a person and have an insight at any time that will be helpful, right? Your client and you are using the principles to create a unique experience of the world, and your feelings and emotions for both you and your client tell us what's happening in thought, right? It's a reflection of that. So that's like, going back to the very basics. And as soon as you notice, right, it's like, okay, I'm a little too intense here. I'm starting to feel separated. I'm starting to feel frustrated. I'm starting to feel hopeless about this client or about my sister, or I'm starting to think, maybe I just should not be sharing the principles. As soon as I start getting a little insecure and I notice, then I realize, okay, hold on, let me just step back for a moment. Let me listen a little bit more. Is there another comment, Bonnie, or how are we doing here?
No, but Verena did answer yes to the question.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Verena.
You were right on. Does anyone else have any comments? Please feel free to type them in.
We're going to give you a few moments. While we wait, one of the things that I heard deeply in my heart, Sid used to say this a lot, is the feeling informs you. I heard that deeply. The feeling informs you. Today, I can see, back when I had such strong agenda, such inflexible agenda about the principles. I could feel it, right? I could feel the rigidity and sense of hierarchy, really, that I would walk into the room sometimes. But I really thought that I knew better. In that moment, it just escaped me. I don't know how, right? Like I could go and work with kids, or I can work with clients directly, or I can work in communities, or I can work with teachers. And I was a little bit more aware of the fact that, the principles are laws that are happening all the time, regardless. And as soon as I went back into staff, particularly staff that were using other modalities that were technique-based, as soon as that happened, something happened in my thinking, right? And I would feel the difference. And somehow I was not as aware. Like today I can see, and so I just remember so much this idea of the feeling informs you. There is a valuable, there's valuable information, there's valuable asset, right? To the feeling. The feeling is telling you, okay, look, this is sort of what's going on. Not exactly what you're thinking, but just sort of the quality of your thinking. And it also informed me, right, when I was working with people, and all of a sudden I felt such an alignment with them. That also informs me, right? So as I work with people today, I think most of the time I'm a little bit more aware, or I'm more attentive to that feeling, right? Like what's happening inside of me. Am I seeing in this moment that the principles, right, this energy of life, this power to create, this power to be aware of your thinking, right, that those are laws that are alive, functioning in the world consistently, whether I know about it or not? Or am I forgetting and thinking that they need to be applied? I think you want to do something.
Verena just said, listen a bit more. That's very helpful. Thank you, Gabriela.
Oh.
Yeah, I think we have a little delay, unfortunately, but that was really nice that she appreciated what you had to say. And
thank you for
several, I can't remember which one it was, but several webinars ago, I remember somebody asking that question: what does it mean that there's information in the feeling? And I think that you just gave a really great answer to that. So I hope, I don't remember who it was that asked, but I hope they're watching, that it's not information as our intellect, or this is what I'm hearing you say anyway,
mm-hmm.
Not information that our intellect can necessarily parse out and make sense of. It's informing us that there is not unclear thinking going on that's creating
Sure.
a feeling of separation or a feeling of unease or whatever that is, and that's the information. It's not like information as you're doing this wrong and da 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 da,
Sure.
but more of a knowing that our thinking is not as clear as it could be.
Mm-hmm. It's a little funny right now. Yeah, I love that point. Sometimes I go to here in the Bay Area, we have these microclimates, right? So it can be 100 degrees or 40 centigrade, right? And then like literally 20 minutes, it can be 60 or like 15, right? I mean, it's dramatic, the change in a very short proximity. And so what I do sometimes, if I'm going to be traveling here in the Bay Area with a different microclimate, I just get on my phone and say, okay, what's happening? Oh, it's 56, right? Or it's 12 degrees, whatever. Okay, I need a sweater, right? There is not an intellectual analysis of the weather patterns in the world and to why is this happening. It's very simple, and I love that you just said that, Bonnie. It's very simple. It's just the quality of your thinking is reflected in the quality of your feeling, right? But again, we have this tendency to leap back into the outside in paradigm and the technique paradigm, right? The analytical paradigm, right? So it's like, well, what does this mean? Why am I feeling this way? What's behind this feeling? Is it true? Is it not true? I should not be feeling this way. I know the principles, right? I should always be accepting, blah, 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 blah. And I love the simplicity of, oh, it's going to be cold. Take a sweater, right? Oh, it's going to be hot. Wear shorts, right? Oh, I'm feeling a little intense right now. Okay, cool, right? I'm going to back off a little, right? It's almost like sometimes we, because we oscillate, right? We see that it's inside out, and then we forget. We see that it's inside out, and then we forget, right? I see that we're the principles, and then I was like, no, there are this kind of people in the world and that kind of people in the world, right? And I think that oscillation, that seen and not seen, is common. It's human. Yeah. Again, one of the things that I heard Sid said that was really cool is like, look, you're going to wake up from the dream and then you're going to go back and dream, right? It's just what happens. But sometimes we see deeply and then we go back to this paradigm of doing, right? And it's like, okay, well, what does it mean about me as a three principles person that I am feeling jealous or that I'm feeling upset or that I still get stressed out? Well, it means that the principles are working perfectly, right? Like, we are not going to skip the human experience because we understand how things work, right? I understand how gravity works, but that doesn't mean that I'm from now on never going to drop things. Like, I'm going to drop things and they're going to break because the law of gravity continues to work whether I remember it or not, right? It's just, that's what happens. But somehow we think that because we know about the principles now, we're only going to experience life in a certain flavor. And in a sense, when we do that, we forget that these are laws at work. And we think there are good ideas to practice. So we can have only, a particular flavor of life. Right? We kind of just go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, right? And of course, reflecting back, that's what I used to do with these meetings that I was telling you about. Right? I would go in there, forget that these are laws that are working, and say, well, if you only knew what I knew, then you would, be better, more insightful, whatever. So I think in closing, because I'm noticing it's 10 o'clock, I just, I get so touched and so lighthearted when I remember that these laws that we're talking about are and they're working, and that I don't have to worry about making them work. That every single human being literally is the energy and intelligence of life in the shape of, John or Susie or Gabriela or, whomever. When I'm able to see that, as a side effect, what happens is just such a sense of unity and connection, right? And noticing that feeling informs me about the quality of my thinking. So I love it when I see this. Sometimes I don't, but when I see it, there's just like, okay, let's just go and play, let's just play in life. Let's just relax a little bit.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you so much.
And just want to remind everybody once again that tomorrow is the last day for the early bird discount for the 3PGC conference. So hopefully you're listening today or tomorrow. July 15th, it does end. But in any case, we hope to see you at the 3PGC conference. And let's see, the next webinar is on July 26th with Linda Ramos.
Oh, Linda.
Yeah.
Linda Ramos, yeah.
And then following that, on August 11th, is Kathy Casey.
Cool. Well, look, the Santa Clara contingency's in the house.
So thank you, everyone, and thank you for joining us live or whether you're watching it after, and we'll see you next time.
Take care. Thank you so much.